Good morning, students. Welcome to TalentBlazer, India's latest platform to provide all the solution for your UGC NET related queries and problems. I'm your teacher and your friend in this journey, and I will be teaching you paper 2 commerce, and the subject code for the same is 08, right? The subject code for commerce is 08, and we were discussing the unit 1, and we have covered a considerable part in the last video. And in this video, we'll be talking about the second part of the first unit, right? The first unit is business environment and international business, right? So we have covered business environment, and in this video we'll talk about international business. All right, now let's get started with international business. So what is international business? We'll discuss that, right? And then there are so many other things to discuss. In this video we'll cover a lot of things, and there is a gentle reminder that whenever you do join in session, if you do like the session, please do leave a like and share it with your friends, because we are providing everything uh, uh, in these sessions, and you can share with your friends, because these sessions will be very informative and you will be very uh, getting benefited from all these sessions, right? You will be at an advantages after going through all the sessions, right? So in this video we'll talk about international business. What is international business? We'll start with the definition, right? So what is international business? International business refers to cross-border commerce and other business transaction between government or companies, right? So this is one of the features of the definition of international business. So international business refers to cross-border commerce. So it comes with trade of goods and services. So commerce include everything, and other business transaction between government or companies. So you might be wondering whether an individual will not be included, will not be a part of international business. Let's read the second part of the definition, what that tells us. The exchange of goods and services among individuals and businesses in multiple countries also forms a part of international business. So your doubt has been resolved here. So that exchange of goods and services among individuals and businesses in multiple countries parts of, also forms a part of international business. So we are talking about a specific entity such as MNC, multinational corporation, or international business company that engages in business among multiple countries are also a part of international business. So there is a cross-border transaction. Let's say if I am an individual and I export some certain goods to other country, there should be a cross-border transaction, and it's international business won't happen. Let's say if I am exporting, if I am sending the goods from, let's say, Delhi to Kolkata or Karnataka, that's not the cross border transaction, right? So that's within the territorial region transaction, that won't be a part of international business. I hope I have made myself clear with the definition of international business. The next thing do discuss about what is trade. It's very important to know what the trade means, right? So trade involves the transfer of goods or services from one person or entity, to emphasize on what entity, right, to another. So it covers all businesses, company, everything is covered in entity region, from one person or entity to another, often in exchange for money. So you exchange goods or services and receive money in exchange, right? Next up, a system or network that allow trade is called a market. So there is a system or network that allow trade. So basically, the domain in which you are trading, we we call it as market, right? So market is known as a domain in which the other trade usually happens, right? An early form of trade, barter system, saw the direct exchange of goods and services for other goods and services. So we are talking about the time where the currency wasn't there, right? There was no exchange for money. So we're talking about the barter system. So you guys must have heard about the barter system, and this picture depicts what barter system basically is. This guy is having chicken, and he doesn't want that, and he wants a fish. So the other guy who has a fish wants chicken, So basically they are exchanging the goods, right? And they can exchange services as well, right? There is no monetary transaction being involved, so we are talking about barter system here. So there is no monetary transaction being involved, and the goods are being exchanged. So this is what basically barter system is. So this is the definition of trade. We have talked about trade in trade, the meaning of trade in today's time, and the early form of trade as well, the barter system, right? So we have covered both of it. Then the next thing, it's the modes of international modes of entry into international business. So it's a very basic thing. When you are studying about international business, the basic thing that will kick to your mind, okay, so how do I enter into international business? What are the modes or the methods of entry into international business? So we will cover the most important methods or modes of entry into international business one by one. The first one being exporting, right? It is the process of selling goods and services produced in one country to other country. So this is what basically exporting means. I'll explain you with this with an example, right? So let's assume I am producing some electronic goods, let's say phone chargers, and there is demand of phone chargers in my neighbor countries, let's say Nepal, Bangladesh, right, and Sri Lanka even. So I'll sell them all the goods, the charger, right? And that will be called as exporting, because I'll be selling my goods to other nations, right? It's not limited to the neighbor nation, but all around the globe. But I gave you an example just of the neighboring nations, right? So that is what basically the process of exporting is. The next step, what is joint venture? You guys must have heard this term a lot of times when we have studied in our bachelor's, in our master's, and even in our schooling, right? So it is a strategy used by companies to enter a foreign market by joining hands and sharing ownership and management with another company. So we're talking about joint venture. So I'll relate with an example. You guys must have heard of Starbucks, right? A very big brand, right? And before entering into India, they were quite afraid because they were not aware about how does the Indian market functions, right? So they cannot, they were not risking to directly enter into India. What they did was basically get in touch with Tata. Whenever you go to any Starbucks, there is mention uh, by Tata, right? There will be a mention of Tata as well, right? So they talk to Tata, and they come up with terms and conditions that were suitable to both, right? It is used when two or more company wants to achieve some common objectives, and other thing that is very crucial, that they want to expand their international operation. So Starbucks wanted to expand their international operation, and India is one of the biggest market in the globe, and they couldn't afford to miss it out. So and they didn't want to risk it, right? So what they did, what to get in touch with Tata, and started a joint venture, right? So that's how they enter into Indian market, right? We're talking about Starbucks. So this explains you what a joint venture is basically, right? And I have added few pictures to the slide so that you can easily remember and relate as well, right? So next up, we're talking about foreign direct investment. We're talking about FDI. So it is a mode of entering foreign market through investment. So we are talking about, let's say I'm a company, let's say I'll take an example of Reliance, and what they do is basically buy a telecom company in South Africa, right? So basically they own that company now. They invested into that company. They have bought that company. That's basically called foreign direct investment, FDI, right? So for South Africa, that will be foreign direct investment. The Reliance have bought their domestic company, some XYZ company, and that was the telecom provider, and now Reliance will be providing their services and will be charging accordingly, because they thought it will be a good buying decision, right? So investment could be direct, right? We talked about this just with an example. So they can directly buy that company, or indirectly through financial institution, or they can invest in some company, can buy their shares, right? We're talking about financial institution investment, that's FII. That's slightly different from what FDI is, but we're talking about financial institution investment. So instead of buying the whole company, right, we buy some percentage through stocks, right, through some institution. So those institution buy us through some shares of that particular company. So we are a part of that particular company. We don't own that company, but some portion of that company, yes, we do own, right? So that's what FII is, and foreign direct investment. I hope I have made myself very clear on this. Next up is merger and acquisition. So a merger is a combination of two or more distinct entities into one, the desired effect being accumulation of assets and liabilities of distinct entities and several other benefits such as economics of scale, tax benefits, fast growth, synergy and diversification, etc. So you guys must have heard about the Vodafone and Idea merger, right? Because both of the companies were suffering huge losses, and because they were not able to compete standalone versus Geo and Airtel, so what they decided to curb down their losses, they decided to merge, right? So that's a perfect example through which you can easily relate, right? That's now VI. Earlier it was used to be Vodafone and Idea, different entity, but now they are VI. So what are the advantages? What are the advantages? What is the benefit of merging, right? So there is a desired effect being accumulation of assets. So assets are combined and liabilities of distinct entities. And there are several other benefits such as economics of scale, tax benefit, fast growth, synergy and diversification, etc. The merging entities ceases to be in existence and merge into a single serving entity. So basically, this means that Vodafone and Idea are not a different entity anymore. So they are combined into one single entity. That's what basically merger is, right? Do remember through example, and you will not forget it for the lifetime, right? That's a idea behind all this lecture, right? So you can easily relate everything with an example. And next up, we talk about two most important methods. You guys must have heard about this: licensing and franchising, right? We'll discuss both of them. So, what is licensing? Licensing is a method in which firm gives permission to a person to use its legally protected product or technology. So, how the product or the technology is protected through the product or technology, it's either trademarked or copyrighted, and to do business in a particular manner for an agreed period of time and within agreed territory. So you give license to operate within agreed territory. Let's say Microsoft has given license to Dell that you can use ROS in a particular region in only India, right? That's not the case in reality, but I'm just giving you an hypothetical example that Microsoft has given the license to Dell that you can operate that you can use our operating system only in India, right? So, and for 10 years. So that's an example of licensing because Microsoft is a legally protected product or technology, and every laptop company, be it Dell, HP, Lenovo, they have to license it through, and then only they can use in their laptops, right? So this is an example of licensing. I hope you can easily relate it now. Next up is franchising. It is a system in which semi-independent business owners, franchisee, do emphasize on this, franchisee are the semi-independent business owner. They pay fees and royalty to a parent company, that's franchisor. Fees and royalty to a parent company. The parent company is basically called franchisor. Many students get confused who is franchisor and who is franchisee. So I hope you guys can remember it now. The business owner who pay fees and royalty are franchisee to a parent company is called franchisor. In return, so you're paying something, you will get something in return, right? So in return, for the right to be identified by its trademark, to sell its product or services, and often to use its business format or system. So you're paying fees, you're paying royalty to the parent company. You'll get something in return, right? You will get to be right to be identified by their trademark, to sell their product or services, and often use the business format or system. But does that mean that uh, that that the franchisee cannot have their menu of own, right? We're talking, let's say we're talking about McDonald's. The classic examples of franchising is McDonald's, Subway, Dunkin' Donuts, etc. Yes, they can have, right? As most of you must be knowing, the McDonald's menu in India differs quite from what the menu is provided in USA, right? Because in India, mostly people prefer veg burger, right? So the franchisee gets some freedom, creative freedom to offer their own set of products, right? But that's not the case with license. Franchisee gets some own creative freedom to add on their few products catering to that domestic country, right? So we are talking about India, let's say. So McDonald's have changed their menu. They are providing more veg burgers. That's not the case usually in other countries, right? We're talking about US. The menu differs entirely from what it is being provided in our country, right? So next up, we have covered now the trade, the definition of trade, the modes of entry into international business. We have covered most important points. Now I'll give you an example how the examiner will frame a question. So they'll ask you to match the following. On the left hand side, they'll name the modes of entry into international business. On the right hand side, there will be the definition mentioned, and you have to match them, right? So this is the criteria. Now, because you won't be getting the direct question, what is franchising? Choose from the below A, B, C, D. No, that's not gonna happen. The examiner set question to test your knowledge, to know that whether the student knows everything, like every mode. So they need to ask this the question this way. They frame the question this way. And I want to give an important piece of advice while preparing for any examination, be it let alone UGC NET. You need to go through previous question paper a lot of time. You need to get to know what will be the examination pattern. There will always be an element of surprise, no doubt about it. Else everyone would have scored full out of full. That's rare, rare sight. And in commerce, you get percentile now, right? So nobody knows how much marks have the person have scored, have the student has scored. So I'm just emphasizing on the importance of previous year question. You need to know what is the examination pattern. If you are able to crack it, if you are able to get it, okay, this is how the examination setter will set the question in future as well. You will be able to crack this examination easily. You will be able to get the JRF easily. If you know, if you are aware about the examination pattern, and that awareness will come only if you go through previous year question a lot of times. It's not that you went through one time and you are an expert. No, that's not the case. You need to go through the previous year question a lot of times. All right. So let's continue with our topic, the trade barriers, because we are talking about trades. We talked about what are the methods to enter into international business, but there will be some barriers as well. There are barriers to everything, right? So we are talking about uh, right. So we are talking about the trade barriers. So the first thing, what is trade barriers? So government laws, regulation, policies, or practice that either protect domestic products from foreign competition or artificially stimulates export of particular domestic products. So we're talking about trade barriers. So how does the barriers are imposed? Imposed. So they are imposed generally by the government, right? So government has put up some new law, some new regulation. There are few policies or practices, and the reason behind this is to either protect the domestic product from foreign competition. So I can give you an example for this. Let's say we are started manufacturing some electronic products and we are new into this. Let's say we are started manufacturing mobile chipset, right? We are new into this, and so to protect our domestic products, to so to protect our domestic industry, we'll put some barriers on the international businesses, on the international companies or the international manufacturers who do produce all these chipset, so that those well established company, they can drop the price of their chipset, but a new company cannot do that because of economics of scale, right? Their production will be more and they can endure losses more than the new company. So government has to enforce some barriers as well, because we're talking about international trade. We have to protect the domestic industry. That's one of the priority for the domestic government. So there are few types of trade barriers. So first is tariff barriers, second is non-tariff barriers, and third is quotas. We'll discuss each of them. Firstly, what is tariff barriers, right? A duty or tax levied upon goods transported from one custom area to another, either for protective or revenue purpose, right? So it is quite complex. The definition, I'll ease it out for you. So basically, when a goods or services is transported from one country to another, and the receiving country, the country who is importing that product, levies a tax on it, right? So that's basically a tariff barrier, a duty or tax, right? Tariff raises the price of imported good. As I said, the imported good, let's say USA has exported iPhone to India, and uh, so India is importing iPhones, right? But India has imported some duties, some taxes, as we all are aware about, and that will raises the price of imported good. Let's say the same iPhone costs 70,000 rupees, but when it comes to India, after the tariff barrier, it costs 1 lakh rupees, right? So because of the duty charges, tariff raises the prices of imported goods, thus making them generally less competitive within the market of the importing country, unless that country does not produce the item. So tariff. So basically, this means that after increasing the prices of iPhone from 70,000 to 1 lakh thousand, not many people can afford that, right? Because the prices are so high. Instead, someone will buy another flagship phone from Android and will be getting more benefits, because the budget of the person does not exceed to 1 lakh rupees, and within 70,000 they can buy a decent phone as well, right? So by imposing a tariff, they have increased the price of iPhone. I have given you an example so that you can easily relate, as we have been talking about how to relate with example. Next up is special tariff. We're talking about now the types of tariff barriers. So the first one is specific tariff. A specific, as the word means, there will be a fixed fee, right? A fixed fee levied on one unit of an imported good is referred to as specific tariff. This tariff can vary according to the types of good imported, right? So if you are importing, let's say a shoe, if you're importing a shoe, then there would be a specific tariff for a shoe. But let's say if you're importing a car, there would be a specific tariff for importing a car. So the tariff will vary. So this line means that the tariff can vary according to the type of good imported. So tariff, the specific tariff on shoe will obviously will differ from a tariff imposed on a car, right? So we're talking about the specific tariff, right? And this is levied on one unit of the imported. We're talking about the one unit of imported good. Now, second is ad valorem tariffs. This is the area where they will ask you question, right? The ad valorem tariffs, because they usually ask you question on difficult terms. So because you are not easily able to recall in that these terms in the examination, right? So this type of tariff is levied on good based on a percentage of that goods value. So I'll explain you with an example. Let's say uh, ad valorem tariff has been imposed by Japan on Indian goods. So um, the good that been imported just cost $10,000, right? So now there is a tariff percentage. There is a tariff percentage being imposed, so that cost of the good that costed $10,000 will be increased by 15%, because that has been imposed by the Japanese government, and the product will cost $11,500 now, right? So there is percentage tax. We're talking about percentage tax, ad valorem tariff. deals with percentage tax. So ad valorem tariff, this tariff is levied on a good based on a percentage of that good's value. So basically that good costed $10,000, and now there is a 15% of tax imposed on that, on the goods price, goods value, right? So now it costs $11,500, right? So these are the important type of tariff barriers. Now next up we talk about non-tariff barriers, right? We are talking about the duty. Now we're talking about the non-tariff barriers. When in tariff barriers we discuss about the duty part, right? So in non-tariff are barriers that restrict trade through measures other than the direct imposition of tariffs. So basically if you want to know the difference between the tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers, so non-tariff are barriers that restrict trade through measures other than direct imposition of tariffs. So these are all the other barriers than the trade barriers. So all the other barriers are will come under the category of non-tariff barriers. This may include measures such as quantity and content requirement for imported goods or subsidies to local producers. So to make the local production more, or emphasize on the local production more, the government can provide subsidy, right? So that because you must have heard about the subsidies being provided to the agriculture products, so that's a part of non to make your product competitive. So we'll continue with non-tariff barriers. We were discussing about non-tariff barriers. So if I have to make it easy for you, if I have to describe non-tariff barriers in layman terms, I'll tell you that non-tariff barriers will not include any tariff barriers, right? So there is a category of tariff barrier. There are some terms or important definition that comes under tariff barriers. So non-tariff barriers will not be including any of those, right? So basically, non-tariff barriers will not include any of the taxes, because the taxes or the duty levied comes under the tariff barriers. So non-tariff barriers will not include any of those things. So what is the way to impose non-tariff barriers? How you gonna implement non-tariff barriers? So we're gonna discuss about that. First thing you can do is licensing. You can give license to few of the companies or few of the individuals who can actually import the concerned good or the product, right? So everyone won't be having the freedom or the liberty of importing that particular good. So you award few individuals or organization the license to import that particular good, all right, to maintain the balance. So this is one way of imposing non-tariff barriers. Second, second, you can also impose quota. There could be a limit, right? Quotas come under non-tariff barriers because let's say you have set an amount of that only 1 lakh of candy bars can be imported from Japan. So that is basically a quota. Not more than that can be imported, right? So that's why you can limit the import of that particular or the concerned good. Next thing, what you can do is you can incentivize your local products by providing them subsidies. So basically to make your product competitive enough to compete with international or foreign products, you can give your national product some incentive based subsidies, right? So that they can compete out with the foreign products. So these are the few methods under non-tariff barriers that you can impose some trade barriers. These are non-tariff barriers, right? So I gave you an example of licensing. You can license on the import of particular products, or you can incentivize your domestic products by giving them subsidies, or you can limit the quota of importing that particular product or goods. Now, the next thing that we'll discuss is quotas, right? So, quotas are restrictions that limit the quantity or monetary value of specific goods or services that can be imported over a certain period of time. So, quota by the word itself, you might be thinking that quota basically means restriction, right? So quotas are restriction that limit the quantity or monetary value of specific goods or services that can be imported over a certain period of time. So quota is not limited just only to the goods or services, not to their quantity, but also to the monetary level, right? So we can basically say like in this example, uh, for example, the Indian government could decide the limit the amount of candy bars that can be imported from Japan to 1 lakh every year. So this is quantity based, but we can also put a quota on the monetary basis as well. We can decide a certain amount. It could be 10 lakhs, 1 crore, any certain amount. So you cannot import quantity more than that. So basically, you're restricting the trade between the two countries. So there are few reasons. We'll discuss the reason as well. So just to make you clear once again, I am reading this definition. So quotas are restriction that limit the quantity or monetary value of specific goods or services that can be imported over a certain period of time. The idea behind this is to reduce the quantity of competitive products in local markets, which increase demand for local goods and services. So this is the basic idea, basic logic behind having a quota system, so that the foreign market don't disrupt your domestic market, and domestic industries can grow as well, right? So, for example, the Indian government could decide to limit the amount of candy bars that can be imported from Japan to 1 lakh every year. So, this is a quota, right? So, the last thing that we'll discuss uh, in today's class is what are the benefits of trade barriers. We are imposing trade barriers, so there must be few benefits we are deriving from it. So, we'll talk about what are the few benefits of trade barriers. So, firstly, to protect domestic jobs, right? If everything is imported from the the foreign countries, we are getting basically what the most will companies will do. They'll outsource their businesses. So the domestic industries, domestic people will be left out of jobs, right? You must have heard about the call centers. Many of the companies put their call centers in foreign countries, right? So we get the jobs from that. But let's assume the other way around, right? If there are no barriers, how will the US government will protect their domestic job if those all those call centers are being placed in US? All those call center for the US company are being placed in US, so they'll protect their domestic jobs, right? We're thinking from their perspective. So if there is a trade barrier imposed, so they will be able to protect the domestic job of their country to improve a trade deficit, right? So there is a country which you are trading with, and you are they're exporting the goods more, and like basically you're importing their goods more, and you're exporting your goods less. So there is a trade deficit, right? You're importing their goods more, and you're exporting your goods less. So you put some barriers that, because many of the uh, countries start dumping their products, like China does. They start dumping their manufacturing, their electrical goods in India. So government put some barriers so that the local industry gets some boost and to improve the trade deficit to certain extent. Next up is to protect infant industries. So I was giving an example of startup. The startups are being incentivized by some subsidies being provided to them by the government, and to make sure that they are given enough time to grow and they have enough money to grow. So they impose trade barriers, because we are a third world country, and there is first world countries where uh, there is only product innovation, and yeah, our industries are new, so they need more time to get matured, right? So it is the government duty to protect the infant industry, else the foreign market, the foreign companies will interfere in your domestic business, and they will conquer the whole market, right? So to protect the infant industries to the new industries, you need to impose trade barriers. Next thing is protection from dumping. As I gave you an example of China, what they do is basically sell their products less than what they usually sell in China. Let's say they are selling a Xiaomi phone. What they do is sell lower at a lower price than what they usually do in China. So that phone might be costing 20,000 in China, but it will cost 15,000 rupees in India. So that's basically dumping. But government, what they do to make it fair, they increase the barriers, they increase the trading amount, the trade barrier, and the tax, the duty they impose on it. So to make it fair, right? And to earn more revenue, So basically, when you're protecting your domestic industries, you'll be getting more revenue from the domestic industry. So what the whole idea, what the whole agenda behind this is to earn more revenue. So this was all about um, trade barriers, international business. So we have discussed everything, the modes, the trade barriers, and in the next class we'll discuss a few things more. But as I said, there is a surprise for you guys in the next class. So please do join the next session as well. And if you have liked this session, please share with your friends. Do leave a like and join this session. As I've been saying, all these sessions will be very beneficial for you guys in your UGC net journey, and I'll try to make it more easier. And as I've been saying, in your next in the next video, I will be bringing some surprises. So please do join for the next video, and thank you guys for joining this video. And I do apologize for the audio in the last video, but I hope this time the audio will be more clearer, right? Okay, thank you guys.